So I'm really, really proud to be leading this conversation or being the moderator would be a better way of describing that because the people that you see up on this stage are friends and people I learn from. So Theda is the Director of Training and Education at Certis Senior Living. And as you've heard we Vivid-Pix speak of various primary research that we have done in photoreminiscence therapy, Certis is who we did that with. Jake Rankin is the owner of Talem Home Care and is a certified senior advisor. So home care, we know, is where a lot of people are want to stay and will be staying in the future as opposed to more of a medical facility. And a certified senior advisor, there's a lot to navigate as we age and as families navigate. You met Sherri a moment ago as the CEO of Thrive Center and Charlotte Yeh as the CEO of Yeh Innovation. So, Charlotte, I'd like to dig into something you said a moment ago, which was how might genealogy, family history, connection through stories be beneficial as we age?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. So, if you actually think about what contributes to health or healthy aging, healthy life, about 10-20% of that is genetics. Now, who better than genealogy and understanding the families, right? Of where are the patterns? We wouldn't know about genes for Alzheimer's if it hadn't been for connecting the families or finding the families in South America that actually have the genes that still thrive without Alzheimer's. That's the power of what you bring. Think about the BRCA gene that identifies the higher risk for cancers. And this is an area that's exploding. And because you've identified it, we now not only are developing the diagnostics, but therapeutics. And you all heard of being able to replace a gene in a 9-month-old, a baby who's now 9 months old, successfully. So that power is just extraordinary. But you don't just have genetics. 80% is all about lifestyle and how you live. And I think when talk to, and I'm just new to this whole area, but everyone I meet in the genealogy space have such passion that they bring. And you are also contributing not only to your own longevity and health, but you're contributing to the people around you. So, how do I say that? Well, in the whole science of aging, one things we look at is the telomere length, and the shorter your telomeres, the faster you're aging, the longer your telomeres, the longer you're aging. And everyone's looking at, exercise, nutrition, all very, very important, not only for your physical health, but your brain health as well. But um, there are other kind of emotional well-being, psychological resilience that also seem to contribute to longer telomeres, which you all exhibit. And I mentioned it earlier. One, and there's three that I particularly focus on. There are many, many things that contribute to resiliency or your ability to cope. Um, and just as a sidebar, why does that matter? So the Gallup poll did a happiness survey, and the US has dropped a little. It's only number 23 in all the countries on happiness score. But if you look at it by age band, for those who are 60 and over, we rise to number 10. Versus if you're under 30, you're down at 62 degree of happiness. So age brings you a sense of coping and a sense of resiliency, and it matters. So when you look at that, what contributes to resilience? I said there are many, many factors. I look at three: purpose, people, and possibilities. If you have a strong sense of purpose, you have fewer hospitalizations, you have more preventive services, and there's a clear correlation to lower rates of dementia. Okay, and that is showing to make a difference. And I love the fact, because you're all about helping people, that if you help friends and families for 2 to 4 hours a week, which is way less than what you are all doing on a weekly basis, but 2 to 4 hours a week, you can actually lower your risk of hospitalization by 27%. If you exercise on a regular basis, you lower it by 20%. So that is that power of connection and helping others in purpose. And we know about 35% of people like in the Medicare population, it's associated with 12% higher healthcare costs. So it really matters, purpose. Second is people. So when we were studying, we started picking up on loneliness as a big contributor to health, to poor health outcomes back in 2015, and everybody laughed at me and said, "What are you talking about?" So I'm telling you, it really matters. We now know that loneliness can contribute to losing 8 years off the end of your life. It has a higher risk for mortality than cardiac disease, diabetes, and anything else. And 20% of people with severe loneliness actually cost us 20% more in healthcare costs. And if you're socially isolated, which is objective loneliness is how you feel, social isolation is an objective measure of your network. Um, but a low social network can cost us $6.7 billion in the Medicare space. So this really, really matters. And I'll come back to it with some of the things you can do in this space. And the third is having a positive view of aging. If you have a positive view of aging, you live 7.5 years longer. If you have a positive view of aging, there are some studies to show you have fewer plaques representative of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. If you have a positive view of aging, you are 44% more likely to fully recover from a disability even in your 70s. And by the way, there are some studies that a negative view of aging, which is about 40% of the population because it's so pervasive around us. But that negative view of aging can cost us $63 billion in healthcare. And if we flip it and we say we can live 1 year longer of healthy life, the London School of Economics says that could represent $38 trillion in savings. So again, I like to say we're not aging in place. We are thriving in motion. Even if you are physically challenged, because life has challenges, and you're in a wheelchair, that doesn't mean you can't tell family stories. Even if and if you don't have the emotional well-being and you're cognitively declined, you can still there are now technologies you can put on, you know, headsets to actually see your where you grew up, where you lived, and we can bring joy and laughter. The photos. I can say when my dad has anyone come to the house at 97, first thing he does is he walks up a flight of stairs to get the old photo albums to show them pictures of his childhood. Okay, so so that positive view of aging can really, really matter. And if we can move from aging in place to thriving in motion, as I said, what gets you up in the morning, people you do it with or to support you, your opportunities and possibilities for tomorrow are endless. And that's what all of you do. So, in closing, there's just, I know there's many, 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 many things we can work on. And I would say if there's only one thing that you can do, I would say check your hearing. Okay. You're going, what? What are you talking about? So, hearing loss is so prevalent. It's 2/3 of people 70 and older. Okay. It's 40% of people 60 and older. And you know what? Hearing loss, hearing health does decline with age, partly from exposure and everything else. And you say, okay, everybody has it. So what? Well, I'm here to say if you look at the Lancet Commission on Dementia, hearing loss is the single biggest risk factor for avoidable dementia. 8%, the single biggest. High blood pressure, which you all hear about, is only 2%. Social isolation, which we know is really important, is only 4% lower risk of avoidable dementia. Physical exercise is 2% for avoidable dementia. Hearing loss, can you believe that? And it is so critical to health. We did a study to say if you had uncorrected hearing loss, you had a 52% higher risk of dementia, 41% higher risk of depression, 29% higher risk of falls because you can't hear. And for people with severe hearing loss, they have a 50% higher risk of loneliness. This is so critical and so obvious. Um, and you'd say, well, that's great, but what can I do about it? Turns out with technology, now we have over the counter and hearing aids and hearing aids. Last year was the first study that came out, randomized controlled trial, that if you are at risk of cognitive decline with hearing loss and you get hearing aids, you can mitigate the rate of cognitive decline by almost 50% within 3 years. I'm telling you, it matters. My dad is a prime example. He had progressive classic hearing loss. Classic guy. I'm fine. I don't need to do anything. So for 10 years, right? Wouldn't get hearing aids till my mother got locked out of the house because he couldn't hear the doorbell. And she was out there so he finally got hearing aids. Now I'm a physician. Now, during this period, I'm thinking, my dad's got dementia. He doesn't socialize. He doesn't talk to people. He's angry all the time. He's grumpy. I think he's got dementia. He gets his hearing aids. 2 months later, I go visit. We have a family reunion. He is sitting at the table, regaling people with stories, with family stories. He is just carrying on and like all these things I didn't even know. He gets up from the table. He has this huge stride. My mother hits him on the shoulder and said, "You're talking too much. You're talking too much." And I went, oh my God, he didn't have dementia. He just couldn't hear. And it took my dad several years later, as he found his hearing to be better, to finally admit to me, he said, I should have done this sooner. He said, I was really lonely. I thought I was the only person. And he was such a social, and when he couldn't hear, he withdrew. That hearing loss, uncorrected, could cost us $133 billion in healthcare costs every year and $1 trillion in lost productivity. Are you kidding? Now you can do a hearing test on the phone. Johns Hopkins has a free app. You can do your hearing test. You can do it yourself on an over-the-counter if you've got mild hearing loss. There's now a company that has eyeglasses that you put hearing aids that are hearing aids in the frames. You put on your glasses wherever you look, you can hear in a noisy environment. That's now for sale. It just came out a couple of months ago, all the way to prescription hearing aids, informal. Anything works. But you're out and about, you're talking to people all the time. And if they're saying what, or you're saying what, or say that again, or you're in a noisy environment because you've got a reception, okay, what a wonderful time to talk about the value that you can stay connected with hearing, improves your brain, reduces falls, reduces depression, and that is a really big step for healthy aging. So I know I talked a lot, but there you go. My
Thank,
prescription.
thank you, Dr. Ye.
Can I tag on that for 1 second?
Sure.
So what Charlotte's saying on hearing, we find that a lot, but I want you to think of how the brain works. If you're in conversation, you have to listen, you have to process, and then you respond. That is, I believe you have to exercise your brain like you exercise your body. If you can't hear, you shy away from those conversations. When you're watching TV, you're not responding to anybody. How many times are you watching a show and you drift off, or even reading a book? That happens. Oh, I got to go back and read that chapter, because our mind tends to wander. But conversation, engaging in conversation, is critical for brain health.
Thank you.
It's those nerves you talk about. So I'm 45 years old, and I'm getting hearing aids.
Yeah.
For that very reason, because I do have hearing loss, and it's not about that I can't. It's not that I can't hear necessarily, but because the frequencies that I struggle with, I have noticed the isolation. I have noticed a lot of the issues she talked about. But being 45 years old, I was that classic guy. I don't need it, but those nerves that don't get the exercise because you have the hearing loss, that can lead to a lot of that Alzheimer's dementia she's talking about. So,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to get yourself checked, because at 45 years old, I'm
Charlotte, I'm
Did-
going to
did-
pause. Charlotte, I'm going to pause you just so we can continue on,
Oh,
this,
yeah.
on the conversation.
We'll come back to it, but
Sorry.
Thank you. So, Theda, there is a societal stigma around dementia. How do you feel might be a good approach to improve how we talk about dementia?
I'll try not to soapbox, but thank you for
Go,
that
girl.
question. I think we really need to change the conversation. It needs to be from about dementia from from a stigma to a strength. We need to firstly acknowledge that there is a stigma around it. Just the stigma when we talk about aging is already there, that we're concerned, but to realize that that stigma around dementia comes from a place of fear, of ageism and misunderstanding. First and foremost, unfortunately, more and more people have early onset dementia. So you'll see more people in their 50s, in their late 40s. And part of that could be that we're recognizing and diagnosing earlier, but part of that could be that it does have that onset then. The language we use matters so much. I'm sure most of us can think back to a time when we heard someone say, oh, they're demented. Whole different meaning than having dementia, or they're gone. That erases the personhood completely. For an example, you can talk about Charlotte and I talking over Jake and saying, oh, he doesn't understand anymore. He's not here right in front of him. Does nothing to help that person. They're absolutely still present. They're just communicating differently, and their brain is working differently. Perception and our perception and how we treat someone with dementia is really what creates the care. We have to see the person, not the diagnosis. That is imperative, because that person, whether they climbed mountains or they were an emergency room physician or a genealogist, all of those things, they're still in there. They're still part of that person. It ties into the perils of elder speak. And someone said, well, what is elder speak? Elder speak can be a lot of things when people exaggerate what they're saying to you, and in that baby voice. Oh, how are you today? You look so nice, sweetie, honey. And not that some of us, I know we're in Louisville, so there's a lot of honey. There's a lot of honeys and sweeties, and bless your heart, or bless my own heart. But the perils of using that instead of saying, do you have to go potty? We're adults. Do you have to go to the bathroom, Mrs. Smith? I mean, that's really important in the words we use. To someone in their 80s, that's very disrespectful, even no matter how well-meaning it is. So speaking to adults in adult language is really imperative. We need to reframe that whole narrative about aging and thriving. And I love that we've heard that so much up here. I'm going to steal from Sherri for a minute because she said it and it spoke to my heart. The Thrive Center motto is, we're about aging and thriving, not aging and dying.
Living and thriving.
Ooh, well, so see, living and dying,
thriving.
living and thriving. But I want to age and thrive. And I think in that piece, because we are, think back, did any of you ever think, man, I'm older than my parents were when I thought they were old? And we are, and that's a blessing. But here's the part. Even if we're 20 years older than our parents were when we thought they were old, we're younger sometimes in our mind and our spirit, and not just in the things physically that we can do, but things that people have always. Dementia isn't only a decline. It includes joy, it includes connection, and really expression. I had a gentleman, he actually played the accordion and with some rock bands that most of us in the room would know. But getting out his accordion and just watching him start to play, his face lit up. It was amazing. The more he played, the more the music came back to him. Nothing can replace that feeling and that joy versus, it's a journey and an experience. It's not that he's suffering from. We need to look at that. Also, kind of reigniting the connection through innovation. We've talked about a lot of innovation, but highlight abilities and the engagement piece of that. Photoreminiscence therapy. We've talked a lot about that, and Rick mentioned the Vivid-Pix. It does amazing things in a study, and the article was published just showing 3 or 4 pictures of someone's family prior to medication increases compliance by almost 50%. That is mind-blowing, just to see 3 or 4 pictures. So all of you, if you're dreading taking your medicine, just look at 3 or 4 pictures online. I figured that might help you. But things like video calls. can be helpful, but also how they connect. I myself, I just lost my dad on his dementia journey in December. He had frontal temporal dementia. And one of the things for us that was interesting, if we did a video call and I said, "Hi, my name's Theda," and if you've ever been with someone on their dementia journey and they lose who you are, it can be very hurtful in ways, but I expected it. And I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm your daughter, Theda." And he said, "You're not my daughter. My daughter has that name." I said, "I'm not. Are you sure?" He said, "Oh, no, she's younger and not as heavy." And I said, "But I work in that field. I'm not offended, right?" That's what they said. Those are the realities. I am. I said, "Oh, well, how old's your daughter?" "About 25." And then my blessing in that is he told me stories about myself, third person. I was 25. He told me I'd always been sassy, talked too much, but then also gave me many compliments he would have never given me as his daughter, but he gave me as third person. Then on the other end, my mom shared pictures from when I was a child and trips that we took, and I got to hear all about them and about myself from his perspective. That speaks volumes about what you do as well. And guess what? I recorded them, so I did take note from that and how important it is. Rethinking media and our cultural message, because we live in an anti-aging culture and we freak out about growing older. When I see 20-year-olds wanting Botox, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," that's really a struggle. And Allure magazine dropped the anti-aging language. There's articles out there. AARP promotes aging as empowerment, and it is, because we have so much that we can teach others as well. If we shame aging, how can we embrace dementia with empathy? Because we look at dementia as a disease that people get as they age. Well, they go hand in hand, that we have to support both. It really does start with us. Our shift begins in every conversation, in our attitude. And when you talk to someone with dementia, think about, what would I say if they didn't have dementia? How would I speak to them? "It's great to see you today, Mr. Rivera," versus saying, "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" Now, that's not someone, if you've always approached them as a friend, that, hey, bud, what's up? That's different, because there are, you just have to think about, that person is still there. They're expressing themselves differently, but use that respectful language, and it reaffirms humanity. So I want to end with, dementia doesn't take away a person's worth. Our words should so reflect that. We need to choose language that uplifts and respects and includes, because dignity doesn't fade away with a diagnosis.
Thank you. So, Jake, as the founder of Talem Home Care and a certified senior advisor, you have firsthand experience working with older adults in their home. From your perspective, what are some of the early indicators or subtle ways you've observed how social isolation and loneliness might start to impact an individual's cognitive abilities?
Yes. Well, I think I'll start by saying there are no real definitive signs. They're little clues that you can take a look at to try to put the puzzle pieces together. So these are more observations, and I think than diagnosis clues. And I'd be cautious of that a little bit. A story I have with my wife's grandmother one time. My mother-in-law came to me and she says, "Yeah, I guess my mom is really getting more and more demented. She's getting more forgetful. I think Alzheimer's settling, dementia settling, whatever the case may be." And um, while I will talk about some of these indicators, but these indicators might have dual purposes. And so when I was talking to my mother-in-law, I said, "Have you ever had her checked out for a UTI before?" Because sometimes you can have the same symptoms with someone who has a UTI, and lo and behold, she went and got checked, and
What's a UTI?
urinary tract infection.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that can cause some of these indicators. So if you do see some of these indicators with your loved one, don't just automatically assume that it's the aging process or dementia settling in. Please take a look at it. But loneliness and isolation and depression are I think, big factors that at play, as Dr. Ye was talking about. with dementia. But I think in the senior care space, it's not quite as prevalent as it could or should be. And I think that might be a great opportunity for the genealogists and family historians like you to get more involved into my community, at least in industry, because historically, what I have seen is doctors focus on a diagnosis and managing symptoms, and then in my world as caregivers, we focus on the tasks of being a caregiver. We're focusing on the activities of daily living and the bathing and the dressing and the house cleaning. What we're trying to, at least at my company, is we're really trying to take more of a focus and looking at that mental health, looking at that loneliness, that isolation, depression, so that we can help improve the chance. Because there was a study that I was reading recently from Florida State University that talked that loneliness and isolation does obviously contribute to affecting cognition, but it is associated with a 40 to 50% increased risk in dementia. So, like Dr. Ye was talking about with the hearing loss, this is all things that can be preventable that we should be able to be doing with our loved ones to help combat, aging, at least combat the brain fitness. And so, the last thing I want to say before I get to these early indicators is it's also important that even if you have a strong family presence around your loved one, um, the feeling of loneliness and isolation, depression can still uh, can still be there for your loved ones, even you're surrounded there. So it is something we've always got to constantly work on to make sure that we provide constant engagement with our loved ones as well. So as far as early indicators go, the things that come to my mind are things like increased forgetfulness, particularly when it comes to like your daily routines or appointments. I had a doctor's appointment I forgot about, or I forgot to wash the dishes today. It can seem really minute at the beginning and not a drastic change, but that could be, one noticeable difference in their usual level of recall. You'll notice things like difficulty in concentrating during conversation. If they lose their train of thought a lot, um, they easily get more distracted. They have trouble following along. Those are some indicators that might indicate early dementia as well. Reduced engagement, like Dr. Ye was talking about, that the people side of things, the feeling of feeling purposeful or contributing to society. The more they recluse back, and you might see them not gardening as much, not knitting as much, not getting involved with things as much. And that's where, if we notice of saying us as caregivers and hopefully as historians of genealogy, we can bring their life back into perspective and re-engage them in something that matters to them. Slower processing of information, that is sometimes linked with dementia. So you might see things like general lack of enthusiasm or indirectly, increased irritability. All of those things indirectly affect, the cognitive abilities that we have. And then the last thing I just might say is just social isolation, social interaction. You'll see people withdrawing away more and more and more. When individuals feel lonely, they become less inclined to engage with others, and that leads to fewer opportunities for, like you talked about, mental stimulation, exercising that brain through conversation and connection. Instead of just sitting there watching TV all day long, that's not exercising. You really need that engagement for mental stimulation. So it's important that we emphasize. Again, I emphasize that these observations are not diagnoses. They're not. They could show signs of other issues concerning, but it is things that we need to think about and talk about, and understanding these things overall and understanding how it can overall affect our well-being. That helps allow us to be supportive and provide the supportive measures we need and put in place before isolation and loneliness becomes a bigger issue.
Thank you, Jake. And Sherri, how do you and what do you feel are positive ways that older adults are thriving as they age?
So we tend to, and everything you're hearing is part of what we look at when we evaluate technologies. We do a lot of consulting with the National Institute on Aging. And when COVID hit, I saw so many companies come out of the woodwork on loneliness and isolation. Well, why did they do that? Is because we were all sent home and we experienced loneliness and isolation. And we tended to ignore that when it was our parents, but we actually experienced it ourselves. But we tend to evaluate, I don't think the mic's working, but that's okay. Is it? We tend to evaluate a lot of these technologies on practicality. And so I'm going to walk through a few of them with you simply because not all tech works for every stage of development. So you have to think about this. And so if someone has mild cognitive impairment and you're trying to keep them safe, because I always say it's safety typically that drives us from the home. We all want to be at home, but safety can drive us from the home. So what are some of those techs? And I'll hit on a high level of some of them. I can't possibly cover all of them, but all the watches that are out there that can do geofencing. So be prepared for that period of
What
time.
is geofencing?
You can set the parameters of where your loved one goes. Mom goes to church, she goes to the grocery, she goes to visit her friend. And you can set that parameter for when she gets outside of that range, it's going to alert you. Because I'm telling you, they may go to the grocery and end up in Alabama and not know how they got there. And we hear those stories. I mean, it used to be Amber Alerts. Now we get a lot more Silver Alerts.
Yes.
But these watches will work. They actually implemented it in the villages of Florida because so many people were getting lost and they couldn't find them. It was costing Sumter County Sheriff's Office $13,000 for every incident, and they bought the watches for their frequent flyers. And so, and you look at that, and they have GPS too, where now you can go right to that person and find them. Voice assistants, you know, we're all used to Alexa and Google. And when people say they're not going to use this technology, let me tell you, we're baby boomers and they will use the technology. I remember when the internet was introduced and I had the first cell phone that was a bag phone. But when we're preparing, we have to think about those, our children who will be shopping for us. They communicate with us through technology. Where I may expect it, they will demand it because that's all they've ever known. Then I look at exercising the brain. We have a product called Brain HQ out of Posit Science, and they believe in speed of processing. But you know who was using it? Athletes. Tom Brady is a spokesman for them. And he didn't think that he was thinking as quickly on his feet. So these are Stanford professors. They developed this and they started putting him through this Brain HQ. We have that in the center. A lot of people, we'll even have them stand on the foam and do their balance while they're doing Brain HQ. Because exercise for our population has got to be engaging. So we look at, and we host a Strap to Thrive program where we assess their gait and balance. And what we know is when they're not coming in there in the fall and the spring semester, because we partner with the PTs and OTs through our universities here, when they're not coming in, they decline. When they come back, we start to see their gait and balance go up again. And then in the middle stage, you start to prepare your home. So smart appliances. We have an induction cooktop because we don't have to worry about them leaving the stove on. It will shut off. But there is a company called iGuard Stove, which if you have electric and gas, it can also shut off that stove when they walk away. Prevents a lot of fires. So you have to think about the appliance. I also look at someone who's visually impaired or with a walker who they touch all of the surfaces on the way to the refrigerator. I don't have to worry about them burning themselves on an induction cooktop. And then we're seeing social companion robots. LEQ is one. State of New York bought about 900 of them and distributed to the rural areas of New York for loneliness and isolation. And, and I go back to COVID. And it really bothers me how people stood on the outside of windows and held up a sign. And that person on the other side of that window is like, why aren't they talking to me? And there is a product called Eversound, and it's high definition headsets where you could carry on a conversation with that person, even separated by that window. And I was hoping more and more people would adopt this during COVID because for the person on the other side of the window with dementia, I think it would have been very helpful. And then Charlotte mentioned virtual reality. There's a lot of virtual reality out there that is used for entertainment and travel, and I love that. But we are also using VR for eye tracking. I personally do not like the test we give for dementia. I don't care for the clock. How many people now have an analog clock? They're digital. I know the purpose behind it, but I also don't like, I'm going to give you these 3 words or 5 words, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you to remember them. Because I watched my mother stress level go up, blood pressure probably shot up, and anxiety set in on, oh my gosh, I've got to remember these because they're going to think I have dementia. And she would get in my car and she would repeat them. But we can use gaming through virtual reality that can do the eye tracking, and it can tell where there's a processing gap in the brain. And they're playing a game. Harvard sent me some VR glasses and wanted me to look at it for dementia because they were using it for concussion therapy. And through the eye tracking, they could see with athletes where there was a processing gap in the brain. And then they were doing deep brain stimulation. And they thought, if it works for concussion, could it work for dementia? So there's a lot of research in this area. Smart clocks for reminders. But I'm going to tell you this too. You'll never find a medication device in the Thrive Center. And every time somebody brings it to me, I'm like, you can dispense medication all day long, but you do not know if they took it. I can't tell you how many pills I found under the sofa, in between the cushions on the seats. And the only thing, and I know they're looking at this, are chips in the medicine. Where you'll know the dosage and you'll know that they actually took it and swallowed the medication. So a lot of research in that area. Jubilee TV, we were talking about it earlier. It integrates into the TV where you can change the remote on the TV. How many times my mother would call me because she thought her TV was broken, but she got it off of the right source code. They actually started in consumer, so they can switch that TV, and they can also set a timer to say, oh, she likes to watch Jeopardy every night at 7:00, and it's going to turn to Jeopardy. But you can also appear through the TV to talk to them and carry on a conversation through a video call. And lots of sensors. Oh my gosh, I see so many sensors that can collect analytics of how long were they in bed today? Are they on the floor? There's LiDAR, there's radar, there's thermal sensing. We see so many of those that are sending out the alerts, and they pick up on the habits of that person in the home, and they know when they're trending outside of that habit. You mentioned UTIs. Someone with a UTI will present with confusion and likely a fall. Now you've got more complications. There is a company called Toy Labs that's a smart toilet seat. And it's working in a lot of skilled nursing facilities, first in memory care. Why memory care? Because they can't really tell them what's going on. They may present with agitation. They may know they just don't feel good. but they can analyze the output of that person, and they can collect that data, and they will know if it's a UTI, they have picked up on colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, or just dehydration. And they will alert the nurses station. Now, what these memory care communities will tell you is it's really saved them, because the last thing you want to do is to triage someone with dementia and cause frustration and agitation. So if you can cut down on the enemas and the catheterization, we are giving them back their dignity. And we'll talk a lot about these technologies really dignify that person. And then in the late stages, we do a lot with music and memory. You know how songs take you back to a place and time? And this is interesting because I've had PTs and OTs who have done their doctoral capstone work at Thrive under our mentorship. And so I go and evaluate them and watch. And when they're doing music and memory, it's not somebody sitting there playing a piano. And it's really engaging them in stories about that song, taking them back to the decade when that song came about. And I watched two CNAs on both sides of a lady walk her down the hall and seat her in the circle before they started music and memory. And they had to guide her down there and kind of hold her up. When that student started the music, I watched her get up and dance. And she took her, and then she's inviting everybody else in the circle to dance. And I can tell you, this student had no idea who the artist was, because she was probably back in the 30s or 20s in that decade. And she had never heard that song before, because I hadn't heard that song before. But you know what? They corrected her. And they told her she mispronounced his name. And they were singing the song. So engaging activities are good. Joy for All, those are the robotic pets where they can't take their pets in, but yet these are robotic. We've watched them hold them. I mean, you've seen where they're holding a baby doll, but you know, to have that pet there, one of them was worried about the pet because it wasn't eating. So you have to be careful with that too. Keep in mind, not every tech works for every person. And then, here's a good one. This came out of NIA, Jigsaw. Have you heard of Jigsaw? So this was a really cool device, and she's still under a little bit of development, but they can take pictures and they can put it into a puzzle where you can plug the picture into a puzzle, and then when you touch it, it records the voice that tells the story behind that picture. Mom, this was when we were in Argentina, and remember going to this place. I love this product. I'm excited about it coming out. But there's so many products that are out there on the market. Vivid-Pix. We talked about that one because I can't tell you how many people come into the Thrive Center and say, I never captured those stories of my dad or my grandfather, and I wish I had done that. And I didn't either. And when my mom passed, I opened up the cedar chest and I pulled out my dad's little shirt. I'm like, oh my gosh, he was tiny when he joined the Marines at 16 to fight in World War II. And he weighed 114 pounds. And so I found his shirt, I found his Marine ID. And these are the stories that we let slip away. And we lose our heritage when we do that. So I'm glad for what you all do. I'm going to stop there, but I am going to invite you back to the Thrive Center, because you'll see a smart home with all this tech, and you'll see what NIA is doing, what the Center for Aging Brain Health Innovation is doing in Canada, because we partner with all of them.
Can I get a round of applause for these guys? when I explain to others why I love the family history community so much, it's because you all get to spend time when people are in one of their best places thinking about family and sharing the stories. Why do I like spending time with these folks? Because they're helping all of us age better and stay connected more and understanding that we need to adjust to the worlds that our loved ones are living within. In the interest of staying on time, we have 9 minutes left. Are there any questions? If I could ask you to please come around to the, thank you. And we properly put this into place so that we are able to record everything. Yes.
Hi. So, two things. Number one, we need a handout with everything you talked about because you can't write fast enough. And we're going home to people that we need to advocate with. And so we need the fuel. So all of you need to hand in something because we need that. The second thing is you're talking about stuff most of us can't afford. You're talking about technology that many of us don't have access to. You're talking, my mom's 97. I want to keep her in her home, but I'm thinking that the stuff you've been talking about costs more than I could afford, and my mother would probably balk at because she wouldn't want me to pay for it. So can you help us? Are there grants for things? Does AARP have things? Like, how can we get help for this?
Well,
Go ahead.
and so U.S. Aging, and you all probably aren't familiar with U.S. Aging, they are what we call the AAAs, the Area Agencies on Aging.
Yep.
They do have funds for technology. Now, I don't know where it's being spent, but that's one place that you can go. I am always targeting the PACE plans, the insurance carriers, Prudential. I just spoke in Philadelphia to the long-term care policyholders, or not the holders, but the carriers, because they're trying to identify and prevent claims. Now, they're not selling any policies any longer, but they are now seeing the benefits and the cost savings on claims if they invest in some of these technologies.
Okay, thank you.
Medicaid.
We need help, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of it, like hearing, if you're a veteran, now maybe your mother isn't, you can get really, it's very cheap, if it's service related, which almost always it is for the veterans. There are about 8 or 10 states where the Medicaid actually covers hearing aids, for example. And the hearing test that I said, it's free. It's on an app, on a phone. So
But
there
how
are
much
things.
of this is Congress now cutting?
But the interesting thing is I'm actually seeing more interest in providing technology into the home because if we can keep you in the home, it's cheaper than moving you to a facility.
Yeah.
So I am now actually, there are several, your mother may be dual eligible with both Medicaid and Medicare, but some of the Medicaid managed care plans are actually investing as much as $3,000 in their members for technology at home because it keeps them at home.
Perfect.
So, and you need to advocate, speak up because we need your voices.
Thanks.
I do offer free consulting services, just free. So feel free to grab my card. If you guys want to have conversations later down the road, call me anytime.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Gay. It's kind of a personal one. You had mentioned hearing as a very important component. And I wear hearing aids. It took me about 25 years, I would say, to actually admit that I needed them. And it made all the difference in the world. But I have probably another question that's very important. When I am attending lectures, conversations with my family, I miss out on about 20% of what is said, and my eyes have to fill in the rest and try to make sense of it. And I would say I might be successful, I may not. Am I asking too much to go back to my hearing professional and tell them that I'm missing too much? Is it possible that they can adjust and tune? Because I have been back several times and had new tests and they've adjusted it. I don't want to appear as a pain, but I need some help.
Yeah. First of all, you've identified one of the more difficult areas, which is hearing conversations and speech in noise or with other conversations going on. So, a couple of things. One, and again, this is where we need your help. There is now technology available. So, this setting, which is a conference room, it is very hard when you have hearing loss to actually hear, even if we're talking one at a time because the sound is everywhere. There's old technology called loop technology that can be installed into conference rooms. And if you have a hearing aid with loop technology, it goes right to your hearing aid. There is now newer technology, which is growing called Auracast. And so you want a hearing aid that has Auracast capability because you can then share sounds that goes right to your hearing aid. You can share sounds and can go from a mic, television, right to your hearing aid. So there is real opportunity. The third is you got to ask for captioning and speech to text. And one little side story, my dad, 96, was in the hospital, had surgery, and then he's got a cochlear implant and a hearing aid. I said, oh my God, they're not going to talk to him. He won't hear and understand in the hospital. I brought a tablet that had a free speech to text app on it. I told the docs, nurses, respiratory therapists, lab people, if you want to talk to my dad, use this tablet. He can do speech to text. First time they came in, what is this thing? You want to talk to my dad? You use this. Second time they said, oh my God, where's that device? I want to talk to your dad because it's bedded up and my dad understood. Number three, they came in and said, where is this device? I want one for my family, my mother, my father. Okay, it's a tablet and a free app, speaking of cost. And then I had clinicians who weren't even taking care of my dad who said, I hear you have this really cool device that allows me to talk to patients. I said, it's a tablet and a free app. That's all it is. The best part, and this goes to your story, was my dad turned to me halfway through the hospitalization and he said, you know, for the first time, they're not talking to you, they're talking to me. Okay. This is ubiquitous. 80% of people who use captioning have normal hearing, so there's nothing wrong. Video conferencing, have captioning, have speech to text. It's ubiquitous. There are now glasses that you can buy that do speech to text right in the glasses. Xander, it's one of the most popular things. Now with Meta glasses, you can do speech to text captioning, so the technology is improving all the time.
Kate, I think we have questions from the crowd, and we're going to have a 2-minute break in between the first and second. Please.
Yeah, we'll try to make this very quick. A couple questions from the people watching online. If you could please repeat the name of the puzzle product that you mentioned.
Jigsaw.
Thank you.
Jigs Audio.
Jigsaw.
Audio.
Jigs. Yes. Audio.
And then we also have someone asking about, are there strategies or tools that you would recommend for non-physicians collecting medical history from family anonymously? They are trying to do family history, and due to some medical things that have come up, they're also now researching medical history in the family. And there are people who have privacy concerns and are a little hesitant, and just wondering if you have any advice for those kinds of situations.
Say it again,
They commented specifically for people who are not physicians that a lot of what they're finding is geared toward medical professionals, and just wondering if the average person, what advice you would give to them.
It's kind of like a patient.
There is a program, University of Wisconsin has a program called My Hestia that people can use. You know, Rick and I have taken a look at it, but they can collect their history, and it's a portal that allows for family communication and connection of taking a look at the whole history, starting with family history, but also disease management, a wide variety of things. So I would take a look at My Hestia. Is a free program. I'll say that. I'm not sure what others are.
Yeah.
There are lots of them, but Care Virtue came out of NIA. And they also have a place where you can store those documents, advanced directives. The family can connect. You can let the doctor in to connect as well. Physicians, I'll let you speak to this, but they're hesitant to take that family history because they can't confirm it. But for family members where one person has to step out and a sibling come in to care for the individual, they have a way of doing that. But that company is Care Virtue.
I think the one important thing is make sure the person you're collecting the information that you have permission and that you've asked, because there's nothing worse when we talk about dignity is starting to get all these information and they don't know you're capturing it.
Yep.
So I think just be upfront.
Cool.
Thank
Anything
you
else?
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes. Panel, thank you so much. And panel 2 coming up.
Thank you.